My name is Dina, and at 68 years old, I never imagined my only son Adam would tell me to leave his wedding. We were so close after his father Robert passed away 5 years ago or so, I thought. When I received the invitation from my future daughter-in-law Stephanie, not Adam, I was confused, but happy. I had no idea that showing up would lead to the most heartbreaking moment of my life. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. If you enjoy stories about family reconciliation, please subscribe and join me on this journey. I grew up in a small town just outside Portland, Oregon, where life moved at a gentle pace. My childhood home was a modest 2-story house with a wraparound porch where my mother would serve lemonade during hot summer days. The neighborhood was tight-knit, the kind where everyone knew your name and kept an eye out for each other. I attended the local schools and always dreamed of becoming a teacher, inspired by my third-grade teacher, Mrs. Sullivan, who made learning feel like magic. I met Robert during my sophomore year at Portland State University. He was studying business while I pursued education, and we literally bumped into each other at the campus library. I dropped my stack of books, he helped me pick them up, and that was the beginning of our 40-year love story. Robert was tall, with kind blue eyes, and a smile that made me feel like the most important person in the world. He was ambitious but gentle, with dreams of starting his own construction company someday. We married right after graduation, in a small ceremony at my parents' garden. The early years were lean but happy, as Robert worked his way up in a local construction firm while I began teaching at Pinewood Elementary School. We wanted to start a family right away, but life had other plans. For 7 years, we tried everything to have a baby. The disappointment each month was crushing, and I watched as friends and family members easily had one child after another. When I finally became pregnant with Adam at 30, it felt like a miracle. The pregnancy was difficult, with months of bed rest and complications, but the moment they placed him in my arms, I knew every hardship had been worth it. Adam had Robert's eyes, and my dark hair 10 perfect fingers and toes, and the strongest set of lungs the delivery nurse said she'd ever heard. From the beginning, Adam was the center of our world. Robert took photographs of every milestone, while I kept detailed journals of his first words, steps, and the adorable things he would say. We created family traditions that became the foundation of our lives together. Every Sunday was family dinner night, no exceptions. Holidays were elaborate affairs, with handmade decorations and family recipes passed down through generations. As Robert built his construction business into a successful enterprise, I continued teaching, finding purpose in shaping young minds, while still being home when Adam returned from school. We made sure that, despite our busy schedules, Adam always felt secure and loved. We attended every soccer game, school play, and parent-teacher conference, cheering him on and supporting his dreams. Adam was a bright child who excelled academically. By high school, he was taking advanced placement classes and planning for college. His interest in architecture seemed the perfect blend of Robert's business sense and my creative nature. When he was accepted to the University of Washington with a partial scholarship, we couldn't have been prouder. It was during his sophomore year that Adam met Stephanie. She was studying marketing with ambitious plans to work for a major advertising agency. When Adam brought her home for Thanksgiving, I thought she seemed polite, if a bit reserved. She complimented my cooking and asked about family photos, but there was something in her eyes that felt calculating. Robert said I was being overprotective, and reminded me that Adam was growing up. Life was proceeding according to plan until Robert's sudden heart attack 5 years ago. He had just turned 65 and was transitioning the business to a trusted colleague, looking forward to retirement and travel. One morning he complained of indigestion, waved off my concerns, and collapsed in our kitchen. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Just like that, my soulmate of 4 decades was taken from me, leaving a void nothing could fill. Adam flew home immediately. At 28, he had to help me plan his father's funeral while processing his own grief. He was stoic during the service, holding my hand as I sobbed through the eulogy. Stephanie stood beside him, her face appropriately somber. But I noticed she checked her phone during the reception when she thought no one was looking. The tensions began after the funeral. Robert had left a detailed will with the house, and half the business proceeds to me and a trust fund for Adam that would mature when he turned 35. Robert's business partner bought out his share, resulting in a substantial inheritance that would ensure my financial security. Adam seemed surprised by the trust fund stipulation, asking why he couldn't access the money immediately for investment opportunities. I explained that his father had wanted to make sure he was established in his career and making mature decisions before receiving such a large sum. Adam grew distant after that conversation. Our weekly phone calls shortened from an hour to barely 15 minutes. He had excuses for why he and Stephanie couldn't visit for holidays. When I suggested coming to Seattle to see them, there was always some reason why that weekend wouldn't work. I tried maintaining our connection by sending care packages and making extra efforts to keep up with his life through social media. But gradually I felt him slipping away, and I couldn't understand why losing his father would make him pull away from me too when we needed each other more than ever. The distance between us grew more pronounced when Adam accepted a position at a prestigious architectural firm in Seattle 6 months after Robert's funeral. He and Stephanie moved into a downtown apartment, starting their life together in the vibrant city. I was happy for his professional success, but worried about the geographical distance adding to our emotional one. My first attempt to visit their new place was met with enthusiasm that quickly faded. 2 days before my planned trip, Adam called to say they were swamped with work and unpacking. Could we reschedule for next month? Next month became the month after, and then the holidays when surely I would be welcome. But Thanksgiving arrived with news that they were spending it with Stephanie's family in Spokane. Christmas brought the excuse of a work retreat in Aspen that couldn't be missed. When I finally did visit that spring, Stephanie was cordial but cool. She showed me their apartment with its sleek, modern furniture and city views, but I noticed there were no photos of me or Robert anywhere while Stephanie's family portraits decorated their hallway. That evening I overheard her on the phone in their bedroom, the door not quite closed. "I need some air, I can't handle another day of her reminiscing about Adam as a baby," she was saying in a hushed but irritated voice. "She's so clingy. I don't care if she's still grieving Robert, it's been over a year." I stepped away quietly, my heart aching. That night I pretended to sleep early, giving them space and protecting myself from further hurt. The next morning I announced I needed to return home a day early for a neighbor's emergency, a white lie to preserve my dignity. Over the next few years, I watched as Adam changed in subtle ways. He had always been thoughtful and considerate, calling elderly neighbors sir and ma'am, holding doors open, remembering birthdays. The new Adam was more dismissive, interrupting me during our increasingly rare conversations, making comments about my old-fashioned views. When I expressed concern about a political position, he laughed and said, "Mom, you're not exactly keeping up with the times." Meanwhile, Stephanie rose quickly in her advertising career, winning awards and being featured in industry publications. Adam shared these accomplishments with obvious pride, while mentioning less and less about his own work. In photos, I noticed he wore expensive watches and designer clothes that seemed out of character for the practical boy I'd raised. My life in Portland took on a quiet rhythm. I continued volunteering at my old elementary school, joined a book club at the community center, and made new friends through a widows' support group. Janet, another teacher who had lost her husband to cancer, became my closest confidant. We had weekly coffee dates where I could speak honestly about my concerns regarding Adam. On his 30th birthday, I flew to Seattle despite no invitation, bringing a photo album Id created, chronicling his life. They seemed caught off guard by my arrival but took me to dinner at an upscale restaurant. When I presented the album, Adam flipped through it quickly, then set it aside. Stephanie commented that their apartment had limited storage space for such bulky items. I returned home with the album and cried myself to sleep. The engagement announcement came via social media. I was washing dishes when my phone pinged with the notification. There was Stephanie showing off a large diamond ring with the caption, "She said yes. Wedding planning begins." I waited for a personal call that never came. When I finally phoned Adam the next day, he seemed surprised I was hurt. "Of course I was going to call you, Mom," he said, "but we've been so busy with celebrating and calling her family. You know Howard Island." But I didn't know. When Robert proposed to me, my parents were the first people we told driving to their house that very night to share our joy in person. Despite the growing distance, I was determined to support my son. After Robert's death, I had discovered he was a better financial planner than Id realized. Between his life insurance, our investments, and the business buyout, I was more than comfortable. Looking at my substantial savings, I made a decision that I thought would heal our relationship. I would help pay for their wedding as a gesture of love and acceptance. I reached out to Stephanie's mother, Gloria, a pleasant woman Id met briefly at a dinner years before. She seemed surprised by my call, but warmed up when I expressed my desire to contribute significantly to the wedding expenses. Gloria confided that Stephanie had expensive tastes that were causing some financial strain for their family. We agreed to keep my contribution anonymous. I would work directly with the wedding venue and vendors, allowing both families to save face. I transferred a substantial amount to a separate account dedicated solely to wedding expenses, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This would be my gift to Adam, a way to show him that despite everything, my love remained unconditional. As I made arrangements with the luxury lakeside venue Stephanie had selected, I felt genuine excitement about attending the wedding. Surely such a joyous occasion would bring us closer together. I imagined Adam seeing me in the front row, perhaps acknowledging me in his speech, and the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. Months passed after the engagement announcement with no mention of a wedding date or invitation. Through social media, I watched as Stephanie posted updates about venue tours, florist consultations, and cake tastings. She created a wedding website with a countdown clock, but no guest information. I checked it weekly, wondering when the formal invitations would be sent. 8 months after the engagement, a beautiful envelope finally arrived in my mailbox. The invitation was elegant with silver embossing and silk ribbon. I noticed immediately that it was addressed from Mr. and Mrs. Carlson, Stephanie's parents, along with Stephanie and Adam. My son's signature was printed, not handwritten, and something about that detail made my heart sink. Still, I was officially invited, and that was what mattered. I threw myself into wedding preparations with gusto. A shopping trip to Portland's finest boutique yielded a powder blue dress that the saleswoman assured me was perfect for the mother of the groom. I bought new shoes, had my hair styled, even splurged on a professional makeup consultation. For the first time since Robert died, I felt a flicker of the old joy. Behind the scenes, I was also busy ensuring that all the wedding payments were properly arranged. The venue manager, Thomas, had become my main contact. He was discreet about my financial involvement while keeping me informed of developments. When Stephanie upgraded to premium floral arrangements and a famous local band, I simply transferred additional funds without complaint. Through mutual friends in Seattle, I began hearing concerning comments about Adam's attitude toward me. Carol, whose daughter had attended college with Adam, mentioned awkwardly that Ped referred to me as controlling during a dinner party. Another acquaintance reported that Adam had complained about my constant interference in his life, though I had been careful to give them space. During a phone call with Gloria Stephanie's mother, revealed that the wedding plans had expanded considerably. The original guest list of 100 had grown to 250. The simple champagne toast was now an open premium bar. The honeymoon had changed from a week in Hawaii to 3 weeks in Europe. Gloria sounded stressed. Frank and I are stretched to the limit, she confided. Stephanie insists. This is her only wedding and needs to be perfect. Adam just agrees with everything she wants. I reassured her that the additional expenses would be covered, never revealing that I was taking money from my retirement savings to make this possible. My financial advisor cautioned me about the withdrawals, but I explained that this was an investment in my relationship with my only child. What better use for the money Robert and I had saved than to ensure Adam's happiness? The week before the wedding arrived, with no direct communication from Adam, I called and left cheerful messages about my travel plans, but received only brief texts in response. 3 days before the ceremony, he finally texted, "Just checking if you're still planning to attend." The question struck me as odd. Of course I would be there. I responded enthusiastically, asking if he needed anything, and expressing my excitement. His reply was vague. "Okay, see you there. Lots going on." On the morning of the wedding, I woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. As I dressed carefully in my new outfit, I practiced what I would say when I saw Adam. Nothing too emotional, nothing that could be interpreted as criticism or pressure, just love and support for his special day. The 2-hour drive to Lake Sammamish gave me time to reminisce. I remembered teaching Adam to ride his bicycle, Robert, running alongside, holding the seat, until suddenly letting go and watching our son pedal forward on his own. I thought about high school graduation, how handsome Adam had looked in his cap and gown, and the tender hug he gave me afterward, whispering, "Thanks for everything, Mom." Where had that grateful, loving son gone? I arrived at the venue 90 minutes before the ceremony, wanting to be settled and composed. The Cascade Lake Lodge was even more beautiful than the photos with panoramic windows overlooking the water and mountains beyond. Flowers adorned every surface, and staff in formal attire directed guests toward the ceremony space. As I approached the entrance, I noticed a wedding party gathered on the terrace. Young men in tuxedos and women in identical sage green dresses were posing for photographs. I didn't recognize any of them, which seemed strange. Wouldn't Adam have included childhood friends or cousins in his wedding party? Then I spotted Adam among them, looking handsome and nervous in his black tuxedo. My heart swelled with pride and longing. A young woman with a clipboard approached me, asking if I was with the bride or groom. "The mother of the groom," I answered with a smile. She looked confused, checking her list before directing me toward the ceremony space with an uncertain nod. As I entered the flower-filled room where my son would be married, I had no idea I was walking into the most painful moment of my life. The ceremony space took my breath away. Hundreds of white roses and lilies created an enchanted garden atmosphere, with crystal chandeliers suspended from the wooden beamed ceiling. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, making the lake beyond sparkle like diamonds. White chairs with sage green sashes formed a perfect aisle leading to an elaborate floral arch where Adam would soon be married. I knew the flowers alone must have cost thousands of dollars, funds I had happily provided. I chose a seat in the third row on the right, the groom's side close enough to see Adam's face during the ceremony, but not so close as to make him self-conscious. The chairs around me remained empty, while the bride's side quickly filled with elegantly dressed guests. I smiled politely at the few people who glanced my way, feeling increasingly out of place, despite my careful preparations. That's when I saw Adam enter from a side door speaking with the officiant. He looked around the room, his eyes passing over me at first, then returning with a visible start of recognition. His face, which had been nervous but happy, transformed instantly. His eyebrows drew together and his mouth tightened into a thin line that reminded me painfully of Robert when he was angry. Adam excused himself from the officiant and strode directly toward me, moving so quickly that several guests turned to watch. As he approached, I stood smiling, uncertainly, arms half raised for an embrace, but his body language stopped me cold. He stood rigidly before me, keeping a deliberate distance. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low but harsh. Confused, I reached into my purse and produced the invitation. "I was invited, Adam. I wouldn't miss your wedding." He glanced at the invitation, then back at my face, his expression hardening further. "I'm sorry, but you weren't invited. Go away." I felt as though head physically struck me. My hands began to tremble as I pointed to the invitation. "But, Adam, it has my name. It's addressed to me." "That was a mistake," he said, looking around to see who might be watching our exchange. "Stephanie must have mixed up the guest list. You need to leave. Now." My voice failed me. I could only stare at my son, this stranger wearing Adam's face, but speaking with cruel words. I'd never imagined hearing from him. Tears burned in my eyes, but I fought to maintain my composure in this room full of witnesses to my humiliation. Before I could find my voice, Stephanie appeared at Adam's side, resplendent in a designer gown that I recognized from bridal magazines, costing nearly $20,000. Another expense I had covered. Her professionally styled blonde hair was crowned with a diamond tiara that caught the light as she tilted her head to whisper urgently in Adam's ear. Though she spoke quietly, I caught fragments. "Your mother. Making a scene. Security if necessary. Told you this would happen." Adam nodded, his jaw tight, as a wedding planner I recognized as Melissa hurried over, clipboard in hand. "Is everything okay?" Melissa asked her, eyes darting between us. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. "My mother was just leaving," Adam said firmly. "She wasn't on the guest list." Melissa's professional smile faltered as she turned to me. "I'm so sorry for the confusion, ma'am. Perhaps there was a miscommunication." I found my voice at last, though it emerged as a whisper. "I have an invitation. I'm Adam's mother. How could there be a miscommunication about that?" Stephanie stepped forward, her smile not reaching her cold eyes. "Dina, we discussed this. We decided on a small wedding party, immediate family only. And since Adam's father isn't with us anymore." She let the sentence hang, the implication clear. I no longer qualified as immediate family. The room seemed to tilt around me. I had never had such a conversation with either of them. This was a blatant lie, told smoothly and confidently to make me appear confused or delusional. I looked to Adam, waiting for him to correct this falsehood to defend me. Instead, he nodded in agreement. "Mom, it's better if you go. You're making this awkward for everyone." By now, several guests were openly watching. I heard murmurs and saw a security guard approaching from the entrance. The ultimate indignity loomed being physically escorted from my son's wedding like an unwanted intruder. Drawing on some deep reserve of dignity, I straightened my shoulders and looked directly into Adam's eyes. "I hope you'll be very happy, Adam. I truly do." I turned and walked steadily toward the exit, my chin high despite the tears now flowing freely down my cheeks. The security guard stepped aside, his expression uncomfortable as I passed. No one else spoke to me or tried to stop me. Within minutes, I was sitting in my car, in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white, trying to breathe through waves of pain that felt like physical blows. How had it come to this? What had I done to deserve such public rejection? The questions circled in my mind. As I sobbed alone in my car, surrounded by other vehicles filled with wedding gifts I had helped pay for. The thought of the money struck me suddenly. They had no idea I was the anonymous benefactor who had made their luxury wedding possible. Every centerpiece, every champagne flute, every past hors d'oeuvre had been secured through my financial contribution. The irony was so bitter, I nearly laughed through my tears. In that moment, sitting in my car, while my son prepared to marry without me present, something shifted inside me. The doormat, who had accepted Adam's growing distance, who had made excuses for his behavior, who had emptied her savings to buy his approval, finally stood up within me and said, "Enough." With shaking hands, I found my phone and called Thomas, the venue manager. "Thomas, this is Dina Harrison," he answered immediately. "Is everything all right with the wedding?" "No, Thomas, it's not," I said, my voice steadying as I spoke. "I'm afraid there has been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm going to need you to cancel all the financial arrangements I've made for today." A pause. "Mrs. Harrison, the ceremony is about to begin. Everything has been paid for." "I understand that, and am sorry for the inconvenience. But as I explained, when we first made these arrangements, the funds were conditional on my being welcome at the event. I have just been asked to leave by my son and his bride. Therefore, I'd like all payments reversed immediately." Another pause. Longer this time. Thomas' voice returned professional, but concerned. "This will cause significant disruption, Mrs. Harrison." "Are you certain?" "I'm certain, Thomas. Please process the reversals now. I apologize for placing you in this position." "Very well. I'll need to inform the bride and groom immediately." "I understand. Thank you for your discretion throughout this process." As I ended the call, a strange calm settled over me. I started the car and began the long drive home, tears still flowing, but something new emerging through the pain, a sense that perhaps at long last I was doing the right thing, not just for Adam, but for myself. The 2-hour journey passed in a blur of memories. Adam's first steps across our living room floor, teaching him to read at our kitchen table. The look of concentration on his face as he built elaborate structures with his blocks, Robert's patient guidance as they worked on a model airplane together. So many moments of love, sacrifice, and joy, all seemingly forgotten or discarded. As I neared Portland, my chest began to ache with a physical pain that radiated down my left arm. Grief manifested in my body, making it difficult to breathe. I pulled over at a rest stop, taking deep breaths until the tightness subsided enough for me to continue home. When I finally arrived at my house, I barely made it inside before collapsing on the sofa. I powered off my phone, needing space from the inevitable fallout. For now, I could only process the reality that the child I had carried, birthed, raised, and loved, with every fiber of my being, had looked me in the eye and said, "Go away." The house was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock that had been Robert's pride and joy. I lay on the sofa as afternoon turned to evening, too emotionally exhausted to move. When the doorbell rang at 7:30, I considered ignoring it until I heard Janet's voice calling through the mail slot. "Dina, I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. Open up or I'm using the spare key." I dragged myself to the door and opened it to find Janet holding a bottle of wine and a container of homemade soup. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug. "What happened?" The story spilled out between sobs as we sat in my kitchen. Janet listened without interruption, her face reflecting shock, and then anger, as I described Adam's public rejection and Stephanie's calculated lies. When I reached the part about canceling the wedding payments, Janet actually applauded. "Good for you. It's about time you stopped being his personal ATM." "I never told him I was paying," I admitted. "I thought it would be a loving gesture, no strings attached." Janet poured more wine into my glass. "Dina, you need to understand something. You've been enabling Adam's behavior for years. After Robert died, you became so afraid of losing Adam too that you accepted crumbs of attention from him. You made excuses when he treated you poorly. You threw money at the problem, hoping to buy his love." Her words stung because they contained truth. I had been so focused on maintaining any connection with Adam that I had compromised my own dignity repeatedly. "But he's my only child," I protested weakly. "What was I supposed to do?" "Set boundaries," Janet said firmly, "which is exactly what you're finally doing now. I'm proud of you." As we talked, my powered-off phone sat on the counter accumulating what I imagined were frantic messages from Adam. Janet stayed until nearly midnight, helping me process my feelings and reminding me that I deserved respect, especially from my own child. After she left, I reluctantly turned on my phone. It immediately began buzzing with notifications. 15 missed calls from Adam, 7 from Stephanie, 3 from Gloria, 23 text messages, 4 voicemails. I started with the voicemails, putting the phone on speaker so I wouldn't have to hold it to my ear. Adam's voice came first, tight with controlled fury. "Mom, what did you do?" "The venue manager just told us all the payments have been reversed. Call me back immediately." The second message, recorded an hour later, revealed escalating panic. "Mom, this isn't funny. The venue is threatening to shut everything down. Stephanie's parents can't cover this kind of money on no notice. If you don't call back in the next 30 minutes, the wedding's off, and that will be on you." The third voicemail was from Stephanie, her voice shrill with anger. "Dina, how dare you try to ruin our wedding? Adam was right about you being manipulative and jealous. If you don't fix this right now, you'll never see us again." The final message was from Thomas at the venue. "Mrs. Harrison, I wanted to let you know that we have processed your request as directed. The wedding party has been informed that all services are canceled, unless alternative payment can be arranged immediately. I regret the distress this has caused, but have followed your instructions as the financial sponsor of the event." The text messages showed the unfolding chaos in real time. Early messages from Adam were demanding and angry, gradually becoming pleading, and finally desperate as the reality of the situation became clear. Stephanie's texts were uniformly hostile, full of accusations and threats. Gloria's were confused and increasingly panicked about the financial implications. Through a mutual friend, I learned that the wedding had indeed continued, but in drastically reduced form. Stephanie's parents had maxed out credit cards to retain the venue, but most premium services had been canceled. No champagne tower, no live band, no fancy catering. A local news site had even picked up the story, "Dream Wedding Becomes Nightmare When Payments Mysteriously Canceled." As I processed everything, I realized Janet was right. For years, Id enabled Adam's poor treatment by accepting it without consequence, by canceling the payments. I had finally established a boundary. I would not financially support events where I was not welcome or respected. The next morning, I called my therapist, Dr. Marshall, for an emergency session. He had helped me through the worst of my grief after Robert died, and I trusted his perspective. In his quiet office, surrounded by plants and calming blue walls, I recounted the wedding disaster. "What do you think Adam's reaction means?" Dr. Marshall asked, after listening carefully. "That he doesn't love me anymore." I said the words painful to speak aloud. Dr. Marshall shook his head. "More likely it means Hez caught between his relationship with Stephanie and his relationship with you. He may have felt forced to choose, and he chose his future wife. But to publicly humiliate me after I paid for everything." The payment situation complicated things, Dr. Marshall observed. By keeping your financial contributions secret, you created a situation where Adam couldn't properly understand the consequences of his actions. While his behavior was inexcusable, the context matters. I considered this perspective, trying to see the situation through Adam's eyes. Perhaps Stephanie had pressured him about the guest list. Perhaps he truly believed I hadn't been invited. But nothing explained or excused the cruelty of his dismissal. With Dr. Marshall's guidance, I crafted a response to Adam, one that acknowledged the pain on both sides, while maintaining my newly established boundaries. 3 days after the wedding, when the initial emotional storm had somewhat abated, I sent a text. "Adam, am ready to talk when you are. I love you, but what happened at the wedding was deeply hurtful. I need you to understand that while I will always be your mother, our relationship must be based on mutual respect moving forward." His call came within minutes. I braced myself and answered. "How could you do that?" To me were his first words, anger still evident in his voice. "You ruined our wedding." I took a deep breath. "You asked me to leave your wedding, Adam. You publicly rejected and humiliated me. Did you really expect me to continue paying for an event I wasn't welcome to attend?" A stunned silence followed. "What are you talking about? Paying for what?" I explained my arrangement with Stephanie's parents and the venue, how Id wanted to contribute anonymously as a gesture of love. As I spoke, I heard Adam's breathing change. "I had no idea," he finally said, his voice smaller. "But that doesn't change the fact that you canceled everything out of spite." "Not spite, Adam. Self-respect. I won't be treated like a stranger by my own son and still open my wallet. That's not how healthy relationships work." Another long silence. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted from accusation to confusion. "Stephanie told me you'd agreed we were having a small wedding, that you understood why we couldn't include extended family." "I never had such a conversation, Adam. The invitation arrived months after your engagement, and I was thrilled to be included." "You weren't on the final guest list," he insisted. "Stephanie handled all that," she said. His voice trailed off, as the implications of his own words seemed to dawn on him. For the first time, he might be questioning Stephanie's version of events. "I think we need to meet in person," I suggested gently. "There's clearly been a lot of miscommunication." "Stephanie would never lie to me," he said, defensive again. "She says you've been trying to come between us from the beginning." "Adam," I responded, keeping my voice calm, "I would like to meet with you alone, just you and me. No, Stephanie, we need to talk honestly about our relationship." After some resistance, he agreed to meet for lunch the following weekend. As I ended the call, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps this painful episode might lead to greater honesty between us. At the same time, I recognized that Stephanie's influence over Adam remained strong, and reconciliation would not be easy or quick. That evening, Stephanie called. I almost didn't answer, but decided direct communication was better than avoidance. "How dare you turn Adam against me?" she began without preamble. "You've been jealous of our relationship from day one." I remained calm. "Stephanie, I have never tried to come between you and Adam. I simply want a healthy relationship with my son. By embarrassing us at our wedding? By cutting off the money at the last minute?" she demanded. "I know exactly what you're doing. Playing the victim when you're really the manipulator." I was struck by how accurately she was describing her own behavior while attributing it to me. This conversation would go nowhere productive. "I think Adam and I need to work through some things together," I said firmly. "I'm not discussing this further with you." I hung up as she was mid-sentence, another boundary I would never have set before. Stephanie's immediate calls back went unanswered. I was done participating in toxic conversations that only escalated tensions. When Gloria called the next day, her approach was more measured. "I just want to understand what happened, Dina. Why didn't you tell us you were feeling excluded?" I explained my perspective calmly, including the fact that I'd received an invitation and had no idea there was any question about my attendance until the moment Adam confronted me. Gloria sighed heavily. "Frank and I had no idea. Stephanie handled the guest list entirely. She told us you had declined because you weren't feeling well enough to travel." The deliberate nature of Stephanie's deception became clearer with each conversation. She had systematically created a narrative where I was either unwilling or unable to attend, while simultaneously ensuring I received an invitation. The only explanation that made sense was that she wanted me to show up and be publicly rejected, a power play designed to humiliate me and demonstrate her control over Adam. As the week progressed, I focused on self-care and preparation for my lunch with Adam. Dr. Marshall helped me identify my goals for the conversation to express my hurt, without accusation to listen to Adam's perspective, and to establish clear expectations for our relationship moving forward. I practiced responses to potential defenses or deflections, determined to maintain both compassion and boundaries. When Saturday arrived, I was nervous but resolved. This conversation would be a turning point, one way or another. Either Adam and I would begin rebuilding our relationship on healthier ground, or I would need to accept that our connection might be permanently damaged. Either way, I would no longer sacrifice my dignity for crumbs of affection from my only child. I chose a quiet restaurant halfway between Portland and Seattle for our meeting. The neutral location seemed important symbolically. Neither his territory nor mine, but somewhere we could meet as equals. I arrived 15 minutes early and requested a corner table for privacy, knowing the conversation ahead would likely involve emotional moments. Adam arrived exactly on time, looking tired and tense. He wore casual clothes rather than his usual business attire, and I noticed he hadn't shaved. As he approached the table, I stood but didn't move to hug him, uncertain of his receptiveness. He hesitated, then leaned in for a brief, awkward embrace before sitting across from me. "Thanks for coming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How was the drive?" "Fine," he replied curtly, then sighed. "Sorry. Let's not do small talk, Mom. We both know why we're here." I nodded, appreciating his directness, despite his obvious anger. A server approached, and we ordered drinks more to buy time than from thirst. When we were alone again, I decided to start with an open question rather than a statement or accusation. "Adam, can you help me understand what happened from your perspective? Why wasn't I welcome at your wedding?" He shifted uncomfortably, looking down at the table rather than meeting my eyes. "It wasn't that you weren't welcome exactly. It was complicated." I waited, giving him space to continue. "After Dad died, things changed," he finally said. "You became so focused on preserving our family traditions, almost like you were trying to pretend nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I needed space to grieve in my own way, to build my own life." I considered his words carefully. Did I try to hold on too tightly? Perhaps. But that doesn't explain why I received an invitation only to be turned away at the door. Adam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that my heart ached. "Stephanie said she sent you an invitation as a courtesy, but that you'd already told her you wouldn't be attending." I shook my head firmly. "Adam, that conversation never happened. I was planning to attend from the moment I received the invitation. I bought a new dress, had my hair done, drove 2 hours to be there for you." He looked confused, but Stephanie said, "Has Stephanie ever misrepresented other conversations?" I asked gently. "Between you and me, or between her and others?" His silence was telling. Our server returned with drinks, and Adam took a long sip of his water before responding. "She's protective of our relationship," he said defensively. "She thinks you disapprove of her." "Have I ever said or done anything to suggest that?" I asked. "No, but—" he hesitated. "She says it's more about what you don't say, the way you look at her, or how you always ask about my work, but not hers." I took a deep breath. "Adam, I have tried to be supportive of your relationship. If I've failed in some way, I'm sorry. But there seems to be a pattern of Stephanie creating distance between us." He started to object, then stopped himself. The truth was beginning to penetrate his defenses. After we ordered food, I decided it was time to address the financial aspect. "Adam, there's something else you should know. I was the one who paid for most of your wedding." His eyes widened in genuine shock. "What? How? Why?" I explained my arrangement with Stephanie's parents and the venue, how Id wanted it to be an anonymous gift out of love for him. "So, when I asked you to leave," he began, his face paling as the realization hit him. "Yes. I canceled the payments because I couldn't continue financially supporting an event where I was treated as an unwelcome stranger." Adam looked genuinely stricken. "I had no idea, Mom. Honestly. Stephanie's parents told us they were covering everything. They took all the credit." The manipulation ran deeper than Id imagined. Not only had Stephanie lied about my invitation status, but her parents had apparently claimed my financial contribution as their own. "Why didn't you tell me you were paying?" Adam asked. "I wanted it to be a gift, without strings or expectations," I explained. "I never thought I'd need to use it as leverage. I never imagined being thrown out of my own son's wedding." Adam was quiet for a long moment, absently pushing food around his plate. When he finally looked up, I saw confusion and the beginning of awareness in his eyes. "I've really messed up, haven't?" "Hi," he said quietly. I reached across the table and took his hand. "We've both made mistakes, Adam. I've probably been too clingy since your father died. I was so afraid of losing you, too, that I might have held on too tightly. But Stephanie has systematically driven a wedge between us, and you've allowed it to happen." He didn't pull his hand away, which I took as a positive sign. "It's just, when I'm with her, everything seems so clear. She has this way of explaining things that makes perfect sense in the moment. It's only later that I sometimes wonder." "If you're losing yourself," I suggested gently. His eyes met mine, suddenly vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. "I don't know who I am anymore, Mom," he admitted. "The architecture firm, the fancy apartment, the expensive wedding, none of it feels like me. But Stephanie is so certain about what our life should look like." We talked for nearly 3 hours, our food growing cold as the conversation deepened. Adam revealed patterns in his relationship. I hadn't known how Stephanie checked his phone, criticized his friends until he stopped seeing them, insisted they live beyond their means to maintain appearances. I listened without judgment, allowing him the space to reach his own conclusions. "I think we need professional help," I suggested eventually, "both for our relationship and perhaps for you individually. Would you consider family counseling?" To my surprise, he agreed readily. "I need to figure some things out," he said. "About Stephanie, about us, about what I really want." We scheduled our first therapy appointment for the following week with Dr. Marshall, who agreed to see us together. As we walked to our cars afterward, Adam gave me a real hug, holding on longer than usual. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered against my hair. "I should have defended you." The first therapy session was difficult. Adam was defensive, often contradicting himself, as he tried to justify his actions while simultaneously acknowledging their harmful impact. Dr. Marshall skillfully guided the conversation, helping us identify patterns without assigning blame. "I can see that both of you are operating from a place of loss," he observed. "Dina, you've been afraid of losing your last family connection after Robert's death. Adam, you've been struggling to establish your own identity, separate from your family of origin, perhaps attaching too quickly to Stephanie's strong personality as a substitute for knowing your own mind." Adam bristled initially at this assessment, but grew more receptive as the session continued. By the end, had agreed to weekly sessions and to maintaining regular phone contact with me between appointments. Stephanie refused to participate in any aspect of our reconciliation. When Adam told her about our lunch conversation, she accused him of betraying her and insisted I was manipulating him again. Her response was so extreme that for the first time Adam began questioning her perspective rather than automatically accepting it. Over the following weeks, we established a new pattern. Sunday phone calls became a regular fixture again. We met for lunch once a month, halfway between our cities. In therapy, we delved deeper into family dynamics, both before and after Robert's death. During our fourth session, Adam had a breakthrough when Dr. Marshall asked about his earliest memories of feeling he had to choose between me and Stephanie. "It was right after Dad's funeral," Adam recalled. "Mom was in the kitchen, and Stephanie came in from taking a phone call. She said something like, 'Daunt, you think your mother is being a bit dramatic? Everyone loses parents eventually.' I remember feeling caught immediately, like defending Mom would be betraying Stephanie, but staying silent was betraying Mom." From that point forward, he began recognizing other instances where Stephanie had subtly encouraged him to see me in a negative light. My overprotectiveness became controlling. My desire to maintain family connections became clingy. My grief became manipulation. As Adam gained clarity about these patterns, he began standing up to Stephanie more frequently. Their arguments increased, often centered on his renewed relationship with me. After 3 months of counseling, he called one evening, his voice shaking. "Stephanie gave me an ultimatum," he said. "Either I cut contact with you again or she leaves." "What do you want to do?" I asked, careful not to influence his decision. I told her I wasn't going to abandon my mother to please her. She stormed out with a suitcase. I felt a complex mix of emotions, sadness for his pain, concern about the marriage, but also relief that he was reclaiming his autonomy. "I need you to know that I'm not asking you to choose between us, Adam. I just want a healthy relationship with boundaries and respect on both sides. I know, Mom, he said. That's the difference. You're asking for relationship. She's demanding control. 2 weeks later, Adam announced he was taking a leave of absence from his firm and moving back to Portland temporarily. He needed space to think, to reconnect with old friends, and to continue his personal therapy. Stephanie had moved in with a friend and was refusing marriage counseling, insisting the problem was entirely his unhealthy attachment to me. I offered Adam the use of our guest house, a small structure at the back of the property that Robert had built as a potential future rental. It gave him independence while keeping him close enough for regular interaction. As he settled in, I saw glimpses of the son he'd known before Robert's death, before Stephanie's influence had reshaped him into someone I barely recognized. He started playing guitar again, a hobby he'd abandoned years earlier. He reconnected with childhood friends, looking more relaxed in their company than I'd seen him in years. He even joined a local architecture firm that specialized in sustainable building, a passion he'd expressed in college but had set aside for the prestigious Seattle position Stephanie had encouraged him to take. Our relationship rebuilt slowly with setbacks and difficult conversations. There were days when old patterns resurfaced when Adam withdrew or I became overprotective. But each time we found our way back to honest communication, often using the tools Dr. Marshall had given us. 6 months after the wedding disaster, Adam filed for divorce. Stephanie contested it bitterly, making financial demands and threatening to ruin his professional reputation. The process was painful, but through it, Adam reclaimed his voice and his values. "She never loved me," he told me one evening as we sat on the back porch watching fireflies. "She loved the idea of me, the architect husband, with potential, the guy she could mold into her version of success. When I stopped playing that role, she had no use for me." I squeezed his hand, witnessing his grief, but also his growing wisdom. "You'll find someone who loves you for exactly who you are," I said, "just like your father loved me." He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "I hope so, Mom, but even if I don't, at least I know who I am again." As fall turned to winter, our Sunday dinners became a cherished ritual once more. Sometimes with friends, sometimes just the two of us. We talked about Robert, often sharing memories and acknowledging our grief rather than avoiding it. The pain of loss remained, but it no longer stood between us. Instead, it became another thread in the complex tapestry of our shared history. By the time Adam's divorce was finalized in spring, he had established himself at the new firm and was looking for his own place in Portland. Our relationship had found a new equilibrium based on mutual respect rather than dependence or obligation. I'd learned to give him space, and had learned to maintain boundaries without cutting ties. We were at long last finding our way forward together. 1 year after the wedding that wasn't, Adam and I sat in my garden planting tulip bulbs for the following spring. The simple act of preparing for a future season felt symbolic, a testament to our belief that beauty would return after a difficult winter. I find myself reflecting often on everything we've been through. I told him, patting soil over a cluster of bulbs. "It's been quite a journey." Adam nodded, his hands working steadily in the rich earth. "I never thought I'd say this, but am grateful for what happened at the wedding. Not the hurt it caused you," he added quickly, "but for the wake-up call it gave me." Over the past year, I'd watched my son transform. After his divorce was finalized, had thrown himself into rebuilding his life on his own terms. He had moved into a modest craftsman house not far from mine, one that needed renovation work he was doing himself, much as his father would have. His new position at the sustainable architecture firm aligned with his values, even though it paid less than his prestigious Seattle job. Most importantly, Head continued his individual therapy, working through the patterns that had led him to surrender his autonomy in his marriage. Head reconnected with old friends and made new ones, creating a support network independent of both Stephanie and me. I never realized how much I needed to establish my own identity separate from being a husband or a son, Head told me once. I went straight from being your child to being Stephanie's husband without ever figuring out who Adam is on his own. For my part, Id made my own changes. After the wedding debacle, I realized how much my financial enabling had contributed to unhealthy dynamics. I met with my financial advisor and established a clear plan for my retirement and future one that included generous but reasonable support for Adam without trying to buy his affection. I'd also become involved in a support group for parents of estranged adult children. Sharing my experience helped others navigate their own painful journeys toward reconciliation or acceptance. Many parents found themselves in similar situations, manipulated into conflict with their children by controlling partners or their own inability to establish healthy boundaries. "Remember Mrs. Peterson from your elementary school?" I asked Adam as we moved to the next section of the garden. "She joined our support group last month. Her daughter hasn't spoken to her in 3 years." Adam looked up surprised. "The music teacher. She was always so kind." I nodded. "Her daughter's husband has isolated her from the entire family. Hearing our story gave her hope that reconciliation might be possible someday." "That's good," Adam said thoughtfully. "It's strange to think our disaster might actually help someone else." This had become one of the unexpected gifts of our experience, finding purpose in helping others avoid or navigate similar conflicts. I'd even been asked to speak at a community workshop on healthy family relationships, sharing the hard-won wisdom that love without boundaries often becomes enablement. Adam had begun dating again recently, cautiously entering a relationship with Emma, a landscape architect Head met through work. Unlike Stephanie, Emma was thoughtful and genuine, with no interest in status symbols or keeping up appearances. The first time Head brought her to Sunday dinner, I'd been struck by how naturally she fit into our home, asking questions about family photos and genuinely listening to the answers. I'd been careful not to show too much enthusiasm, too quickly mindful of the lessons about giving Adam space to make his own choices, but privately, I was heartened by his selection of someone so different from Stephanie. "Do you think you'll bring Emma to Thanksgiving?" I asked casually, reaching for another bag of bulbs. Adam smiled. "I'd like to, if that's okay. She's talking about inviting her parents up from Eugene, too. Maybe we could do a combined dinner." The suggestion warmed my heart, not just because it included Emma, but because Adam was comfortable enough to propose a change to our traditions. Had rediscovered his voice and wasn't afraid to use it even with me. "I'd love that," I said simply. As we finished our planting, I reflected on how much our relationship had healed. The weekly family therapy sessions had gradually decreased to monthly check-ins, with Dr. Marshall noting our progress in establishing healthy communication patterns. We'd learned to discuss difficult topics without either of us shutting down or lashing out, and to respect each other's boundaries without taking offense. One of the most profound lessons I'd learned was the difference between love and unhealthy attachment. For too long, I'd confused the two, believing that sacrifice without limits was the purest form of maternal love. In reality, that approach had enabled Adam to take me for granted and had prevented him from experiencing the natural consequences of his actions. True love, I now understood, included the courage to establish boundaries. By canceling the wedding payments, I'd finally demonstrated that my love didn't mean accepting mistreatment. That single act of self-respect had initiated the painful but necessary process of rebuilding our relationship on healthier ground. As the sun began to set, Adam and I moved to the porch swing that Robert had built decades earlier. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. "I miss Dad," Adam said suddenly. "He would have known how to handle all of this better than I did." I smiled, thinking of Robert's practical wisdom. "He would have been disappointed in both of us for a while," I admitted. "In me for trying to buy your approval, and in you for letting Stephanie come between us. But he'd be proud of how we've found our way back to each other." Adam nodded, leaning slightly against my shoulder, like he used to do as a boy. "I'm still sorry for what happened, Mom. Not just the wedding, but the years before. I should have seen what was happening." "We both made mistakes," I said gently. "The important thing is that we learned from them. That's all any of us can do." As darkness fell around us, I thought about the journey of motherhood from Adam's birth through all the stages of his life. The toddler Wad needed my constant protection, had become a man who needed my respect. The child Wad looked to me for all the answers, had become an adult with wisdom of his own to share. Our relationship would continue to evolve with new challenges and adjustments ahead. There would be more difficult conversations, more boundaries to negotiate, more growth on both sides. But the foundation had been rebuilt stronger for having been broken and deliberately restored. Life rarely follows the path we expect, I reflected. When Robert died, Id feared losing Adam as well. Ironically, it was only by letting go that Id created space for him to return of his own free will. By standing up for myself at his wedding, Id finally shown him the example of self-respect Head needed all along. Motherhood, I now understood, wasn't about self-sacrifice to the point of erasure. It was about modeling the healthy boundaries and self-respect I wanted my son to develop. By reclaiming my own dignity, I'd given Adam permission to reclaim his. As we sat together in the growing darkness, I felt a peace I'd been searching for since Robert's death. The future remained uncertain, as it always does, but I faced it now with confidence in both myself and my relationship with my son. Whatever challenges came next, we would meet them with the hard-won wisdom of our journey, through estrangement to reconciliation. What are your thoughts on parent-child relationships? Have you ever had to establish boundaries with loved ones to maintain a healthy connection? I hope my story has given you some insight or comfort if you're facing similar challenges with family members. Please share your experiences in the comments below, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about family reconciliation. Remember that even the most damaged relationships can sometimes be healed with honesty, courage, and professional support. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and wisdom in all your family relationships.